a part of which reads, Redlands fosters a community of scholars and encourages a pluralistic notion of values by challenging assumptions and stereotypes in both classes and activities. A Redlands education goes beyond training to embrace a reflective understanding of our world. It proceeds from information to insight, from knowledge to meaning." End of quote. As a reminder to guests on this campus, we are governed by the university's policy against discrimination and harassment, which states, quote, "The university prohibits and will not engage in discrimination and harassment on the basis of age, color, physical or mental disability, medical condition, pregnancy, domestic violence status, ethnicity, gender, gender identity or expression, genetic information, marital status, citizenship status, military or veteran status, national origin, ancestry, race, religion, creed, sexual orientation, or any other status protected by law. Discrimination or harassment, including hostile work environment harassment based on protected status, is illegal and will not be tolerated on this campus." End of quote. Our students will be familiar with our ground rules for difficult conversations, which we read prior to many campus events. While I won't go through the entire document, I remind you of our goals. 1, to get facts, and 2, to find common ground. To do this, we ask that all in attendance stand in a new place and listen to a new voice, while staying engaged in the process, watching use of language, and searching for that common ground. I now invite Victoria Hargrave to the podium to provide further introductions.
Thank you, Leila. My name is Vicki Hargrave, and I am part of a local group here called Redlands Town Hall that for the last 5 years has focused primarily on educating ourselves and understanding the threats to our national security in this country. As we all know, there have been an increasing number of threats and an increasing number of violent threats to our freedom of speech and freedom of religion. These threats and what's behind them are complex and I think not always easily understood by Americans because we have taken for granted our freedom of speech and our freedom of religion. And it's hard to understand people who might want to threaten that. So when we had the opportunity to have a speaker come out here tonight that had written a book called Afghanistan that I had read 5 years ago, and I thought it was outstanding. To be able to have an author of this caliber on a topic right after what happened in Paris was just an opportunity that we couldn't pass up. So I'd like to thank 2 groups of people that have made this possible. We were excited about the possibility of having Melanie here, but we needed to be able to take care of the costs associated with it. We had a group of people here in Redlands that were also excited and understood the need to have a discussion about the threats to our freedom of speech. And these people stepped right up and contributed the funds so that we could do the event. I'd really like to thank all of those donors. I'd also like to thank the University of Redlands and Leila in the Office of Campus Diversity. This is a first for us, and we appreciate the opportunity to have an event like this on this subject on this campus. Doesn't this seem like the most logical place to have a discussion about freedom of speech with a variety of opinions, but let everybody talk about it and share what those opinions are. Isn't that what we want our young people, our young adults, to be learning, that that is what mature, intelligent adults do? They're willing to listen to different opinions, realizing that not everybody always agrees, but the most important thing is to have the conversation. So we really appreciate and would like to extend our thanks to the university for the opportunity to be here. The person who made this possible is Mr. Avi Davis, who is the president of the American Freedom Alliance. And he is the one that said, oh gee, we could bring Melanie out here if you would like. Avi is the president of the American Freedom Alliance, and that is a Los Angeles-based organization that was formed to identify threats to Western civilization and uphold Western values. In that capacity, Avi has coordinated 9 international conferences on topics as diverse as the collapse of Europe, which was held at Pepperdine University, How Free is the University, which was at USC, and a global governance versus national sovereignty that was held at UCLA. Avi is an attorney. He is a journalist, a commentator. He's been published in periodicals such as the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, USA Today, the San Francisco Chronicle, Washington Times, Jerusalem Post, and many others. He is the former literary editor of the Jewish Spectator and has been a television commentator in the Middle East for CNN, Fox News, and Adelphia Cable. Thank you all for being here tonight, but would you join me in welcoming Avi, who will introduce Melanie Phillips.
Well, thank you for that lovely invitation, welcome, and I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. It warms my heart to see so many people interested in this topic. It's something that I've been concerned with since I started the American Freedom Alliance in 2007. We began the American Freedom Alliance with a very simple idea that it's not just the United States that faces threats from around the world, from such things as Islamization and the collapse of academic freedom and media bias and radical environmentalism. It's the entire West. The American Freedom Alliance stands for Western civilization and the survival of the Western civilization, which means the survival of Europe. And it's been a deep, deep concern of ours. And it's quite interesting that we have this meeting today bracketed by events around the world which have roiled the idea of stability in the West. Just in December, my home country in Australia was taken in complete shock when a man, a Muslim extremist, took over a cafe and killed 4 people in that cafe before succumbing himself. Of course, in January, the first week of January, we were accosted with the images of the dead editors and staff of Charlie Hebdo, which also rocked our sense of stability. And just today, in Denmark, we awoke to find that there have been more attacks on Jews and on those who are supporting free speech and wish to identify the scourge which is now presenting itself to Europe and to its future continuity. And this work that we've undertaken at the American Freedom Alliance gained its impetus from one very important book, and that was Londinistan in 2006. When I read this book, much as Victoria has said before, I felt that I had suddenly alighted on a key element in the survival of the West and the greatest threat to the survival of the West. And I had lived in London myself. I had lived there for 2 years, and I was absolutely shocked, because when I went back to London shortly after reading that book, I realized that everything that Melanie Phillips had written in it was absolutely true. I'm not going to presage what she's going to say. She is going to tell you herself how things have developed since she wrote that book. But then another book came in 2010, and this book was even more impressive to me than the first one. The book is titled "The World Turned Upside Down: The Global Battle Over God, Truth and Power." And this book encapsulated for me the very issues that we were attempting to address at the American Freedom Alliance. All of the issues, from the intellectual battle for the survival of the concept of God, to climate change, to the battle against multiculturalism. All of these things are undermining the 4 pillars of Western civilization, which are God, the nuclear family, free enterprise, and democracy. Those are the 4 legs upon which Western civilization stands. So I am so happy and pleased to be able to bring Melanie Phillips to Southern California, because we began the American Freedom Alliance with an address she made on multiculturalism in January 2007. So we have almost come full circle, and we are so happy and proud to be able to present her tonight. I want to thank the University of Redlands and Leela for your support for this program and your foresight and vision in allowing it to happen. I'd like to thank you, Vicky, for the time and effort that you put into making this happen. I want to thank all the groups that gathered together to make this event a possibility. And I do want to say that we are interested in bringing more speakers of this caliber to Redlands. We feel that this is a very important community and is neglected by the mainstream organizations. So we want to make sure that you are able to meet and hear the individuals who are speaking about the issues about which you are concerned. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce you, Melanie, who is, as you all know, a British journalist and broadcaster and author. Her work is currently appearing in the Times, but it has appeared in almost every major British newspaper: The Guardian, Observer, Sunday Times, and Daily Mail. She has a weekly show on Voice of Israel as a regular panelist on BBC's radio, a program called The Moral Maze, and appears on panels in both Israel and in England on a regular basis. I don't need to tell you more about her books, her 2 books, but she has written a 3rd one. It's called Guardian Angel, which is a memoir. It's the most recent book, a memoir of a personal and political journey from being the darling of the left to the iconic defender of Israel and the West. And that was published in 2003. So it's my great pleasure and my honor to introduce my friend, Melanie Phillips.
Thank you very much indeed, Abby, and thank you to Vicky. I must say, after that overly kind build-up. I was sitting there thinking, who is this Melanie Phillips? I must go and listen to her one day. This sort of superhuman person who's written these amazing things can't possibly be me. It's really such a pleasure to be here. I'm not quite sure what day it is or what country I'm in, but it's a great pleasure to be here. I set off from London this morning. It was, in fact, this morning, but amazingly, Monday has got much longer. It's an amazing thing, plane travel. Anyway, it's a real delight to be here with you, and I am really grateful to you for making this possible. Grateful to the University of Redlands in particular, to the American Freedom Alliance, Abby, who you just heard I've known for some years, to Vicky Hargrave and Ellen Egan in particular, and the other groups that have made this possible. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you this evening. So, as Abby has said, recent events make this topic ever more topical and ever more alarming. Abby referred to the Paris attacks, and that was where we saw, after the attacks had happened in Paris, we saw political leaders from all over the world come to Paris in a great demonstration, a great march, where they linked arms and said they would never give in to terror and would protect freedom of speech. And 5 weeks later, we find that in Copenhagen, a guy basically sprayed bullets at a meeting which was convened to discuss freedom of expression. We are told that he had a particular target who was one of the cartoonists who was named with the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists as somebody who had insulted Islam and therefore was on a death list. He sprayed bullets at the cafe where this meeting was taking place. He killed one of the participants and then went on to attack a synagogue where he managed to murder the volunteer who was on guard outside the synagogue. These two events, are remarkably similar in the terrible trajectory that they followed. Now, there is absolutely no doubt that the attack on Charlie Hebdo in Paris, the attack on the magazine, the killing of all those editors and cartoonists, that produced the most tremendous shock in Europe and around the world. It produced the most tremendous shock in France. It was seen and it was written about as an attack on a core value of the West, an attack on freedom of speech. And indeed, that was how the attack on the Copenhagen cafe was being portrayed, certainly before the synagogue was attacked and even after the synagogue was attacked. It's the freedom of speech element which gets people so very concerned. But of course, both of these attacks, both of these terrible sequences of events in Paris and in Copenhagen, they were also attacks on Jews. And it's very clear in both these cases, there was a clear order of attack. First off, it was the people who were said to have insulted Muhammad, to have insulted Islam. They had to be killed. Their crime had been to mock Islam. And then a very, very specific next target was the Jews. And what was the Jews' crime? The Jews' crime was to exist. Now, people were very disconcerted by what happened after the Charlie Hebdo attack in France. As far as they were concerned, it was an attack on an iconic magazine, iconic cartoonists. These are cartoonists, apparently, that were, household names. And so it was seen as an attack on themselves, the French people. And then there was the slaughter in the kosher grocery store, the Hyper Caché grocery store. And that, as I said before, just now, was an attack which was singling out Jews. And that meant that made people very confused, because it didn't quite fit. They didn't really want to think about that. And they certainly, there was also another attempted attack on a Jewish school, in the course of which a policewoman, I think, was